some way that we can figure out what it is, we can do whatever we want. And whether it's evergreen, whether it's going to keep going, or whether we got to watch that it's going to end and you won't have a contract, because you need to know when it's going to expire, and then should be something in the system that says, okay, the contract's going to come up in 6 months, 4 months, whatever it takes to do a hospital contract. How long does it take to get through the hospital these days?
60 days.
All right. So whatever you need, give yourself a little extra time. And you know, I have deadlines. There are deadlines of things we have to do for the OIG, and I have ticklers in my calendar that warn me, you know, a certain amount of months in advance, so I know, and then it keeps coming, so I know it's coming. All right, services to be provided. You have to know what the services are, which also have to be in the contract. And what are you providing? You're providing literacy service, or you're providing anything else. Okay. What the compensation is, the business need or business purpose, I think it's going to be very simple. Hospital needs lithotripsy, hospital wants whatever it is. Okay? For SWOL only, how fair market value was determined to be in accordance with the valuation we got, or similar to the same valuation, same market area, something like that. And on some things we talked about maybe that it's, you know, what it costs to do certain things when you buy services, that kind of thing. And there has to be a certification in the contract, and so you're going to take care of those things to be sure you've got it. There's a certification on that both parties are not going to violate the Anti-Kickback Act and start. So what you do is those have to be in the contract, and there's got to be something in the system. We'll say, okay, that one's met, that one's met, that one's met, that one's met. You don't have to write the certification in. All right, then we have, so this is the fail-safe, the approval process. So Jim knows that all the contracts are right, and they're there. And then he notes that he's checked it in the system. So we know everything's there. Then it goes to Julie, who's going to be sure everything's there, who sends it on to me or to Tom. And we will go through each one. And so Julie's going to note in the system that she saw it, and then she's going to send it to us. We have to look at all the ones that exist now. And right, all the ones that exist now, all the ones that are new, and the ones that are renewed. It'll get faster as we go. And then we'll just send an email back that says, okay, we looked at it, it's fine, and then you put that into the system. It's a pain, but you know, I think once we get it going, it won't be so bad. All right, and then accounting, if there is variation from the contract amount, then we are checking with the OIG on what to do about overpayments. But otherwise, I can't imagine it happening except for an overpayment or underpayment. But if there's some way that there is a payment that doesn't comply with the compensation amount, it's going to have to be entered in. And then we should know about it, try to figure out how in the world it happened. Okay. Then Julie has things she has to do. Julie's going to be a very busy person. She's got to check this tracking system and be sure that it's working. And all the processes that we have in there to make it work right. She's got to be sure that the trains are running on time. And all the other procedures having to do with focus arrangements are working right. And then she has to implement a response if she finds that there's a problem. I think probably what will happen is she will call us, we'll try to figure out what to do, and then if we have to, we'll report it to the government, and we'll fix whatever happened in the system. I think that this is not a license to do things wrong, but if something happens, and we find it, and we tell them, my guess is that not much will happen, but you have to tell them. But that's no guarantee. I do not propose that I can read the minds of the people who work for the OIG. Now, we talked about this earlier. Schedules are the last chance saloon. They're the last ones who can tell if there was a written contract. Don't schedule a case if there's a problem, if there's not. And you know, maybe there's time to get a contract. Oh, remember that contract, Mr. Administrator, that's sitting in your desk drawer for 3 months? Time to sign it. It's amazing how much the pressure to get a patient taken care of will get them to sign the contract that's been sitting around there. We're going to sign, but they got this patient who needs service. Oops. Now what time do we start?
1:45.
So we got a few more minutes. Okay. Questions? Yes.
This process of approval will apply for even the short-term contracts for demonstration purposes, right?
Yeah. Although we're going to prove, I think we'll have to get through. We're going to do a short-term contract. The thing is that if they don't vary, we won't have a problem. because it'll be the same. You're going to send red lines. So if we see a red line and there's no change, it's easy, right? You know, we'll have to be sure nobody else was involved, that kind of thing. But you know, it's not going to be hard. You know, on these structured. If you stick to the short-term contract as it's written, it shouldn't be a problem. And I know there are hospitals that always look for something else. They always have something they want to do. But that could be. More questions? Yeah.
One of the violations was to
Can't hear.
promise of that other cases, the doctors would bring other cases. We never promised that they bring other cases, but we do say oftentimes if they're doing lithotripsy here, there's a chance that they would do that. It's never a promise, but I mean, it's just sort of a natural thing that actually happens. Shouldn't even say that.
Nope. You know what? If they're smart, they can figure it out.
And they can prompt the doctor and ask the doctor what they think, right?
No.
The facility can't?
No.
Nope.
It's the same. We got the same problem as the doctor being involved.
Right.
You know, the reality is, I mean, they can't ask, and the doctors can't promise. You know, there are doctors who still like hospital X for all their surgery. They like the nurses. They like the, you know, the recovery room. They might just keep their patients there. You know, maybe they'll want to do it all in one place. They don't know. A hope or an expectation is not a violation. So if the hospital signs the contract in the hope that it will come, that's not a violation. You can't interject it or suggest the hope or expectation. But if in their minds they say, well, if we sign up this company, maybe their doctors will come, that's not a violation. But you can't say that. You can't prompt it. You can't offer as a possibility. Even if it seems somewhat obvious, it may not be. You cannot do that. Just keep out cases anywhere. Interestingly, that never came up. It never came up any kind of question about other things. It was only had to do with the lithotripsy and laser cases. But you can't do that. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a difficult thing because, I mean, the only reason why a hospital presumably is entering into a contract with anybody is because they believe that there's a service there's a demand for the service. And, you know, so when a hospital, when they enter into a lithotripsy contract, you know, for their own planning purposes in terms of how often are they going to schedule, how, you know, this and that. I mean, they want to know what is anticipated volume.
I know. It is really a bind. And, you know, I think that what we're going to have to do is to have some dialogue with the OIG. We'll have somebody assigned to us. In the meantime, I've called the people who we settled with the casting. Because that's true. You know, and you're in a bind. But you're right. It is a problem. And I think sometimes the OIG is very unrealistic, or there are two possibilities, or there are many possibilities, but two things that come to mind. One is that they're unrealistic, and the other is that they just don't think about these things.
When you come across that you're withholding information from the hospital instead of trying to work with them, you know, almost because I can't answer that or I can't do this or whatever, and you almost come across like, well, what is there really that you're, you know, holding back then? If you can say, yeah, that may happen, they have other cases there. It almost puts you in a negative position to, you know, your customer.
No, I know. You know, I'm trying to think of something you can say.
Yeah, because I just had this conversation with a consultant on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Wanting to know what, you know, the doctors that would be using the facility and their historical volume.
Consultant for whom?
For
a hospital or?
A hospital.
Was the hospital's consultant and wanted to know, well, for what reason?
To plan.
Estimated service.
See, I'm going to
Well,
talk.
they have an issue with their anesthesiologist, and they're having to supplement their fees.
Right.
And they're hoping that by building additional surgeries, that they're going to, you know, persuade the anesthesiologist that they're not going to need that in the
Right.
hospital anymore.
Add that to my list. We'll have a powwow with the OIG to figure out what to do. Because there are business reasons to do some things that have nothing to do with getting the contract.
Exactly.
But you already have the contract for that hospital?
No,
Oh.
we just started dialogue.
So you want to have it and they want to know what they would need. Do you know But that's the other thing, do you know, when you do a contract, do you know how many will come?
No, I know, I look at the physicians who have privileges at that hospital, and, you know,
Averages.
yeah. So there's, you know, there's never, like you say,
So are
there's
these
never a promise.
investors?
There's never a promise.
Now, are these doctors who are investors or these doctors who are not investors?
These doctors are investors.
It could be both.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be both.
Yeah.
But this situation is investor doctors.
I mean, oftentimes, I think in the past, what we would tell a hospital in some respects is, look, you can anticipate that it seems as though the average urologist does 20 cases a year.
And it's never between the it's not getting it from the doctor and saying, how many cases will you bring there? It's just, are the averages about this? And, you know, they're trying to get information to say, is it worth us bringing this contract here? You know, they don't wanna go through all this, you know, process and say, there's 2 cases for a year.
Well, what happens if there were 2 cases for the year? What would happen?
They get pretty frustrated with, I mean, they're just, you know, not interested in having the service with you or anybody. I mean, it's a waste of their time. They, you know, we don't need to necessarily provide lithotripsy if all that's gonna be the hospital next door could do it or whatever. They're looking at it from a
I
business
understand.
perspective. We don't go back to the doctor and say, how many will you give? It's usually based on, like we said, an average. You know.
We'll think about it, but you may be able to say average people do so and so. I don't look at how many urologists they have on staff. Every urologist doesn't do litho, do they? I don't know. All right, so we'll have to, that's one of the ones we'll
Maybe we'll
see.
even tell them, maybe not even, I mean, if we have the average, may not even be accurate to what actually it is. I mean, we're just saying this is about what it could be.
Yeah, all right, we'll think on that one. It is, we're in a fine line with these questions. Really, you know, I'm not trying to be cagey, but it is the vast gray area of life, and you know, we're sitting there under a microscope.
Sure.
So we have to figure out. More questions? More questions? Okay, let me ask you some questions. So we've now gone through 3 hours of this. So let's get some answers from you. All right. You go to a hospital and you ask them, you want to approach them for a contract. And the hospital says, we'll do the contract if you can guarantee us, you said, a certain number of cases. Answer? No. Okay. We got a contract with, we were offered a contract at $1,200 a case. And you're asking $2,200 a case. We'll only do it if you'll do it at $1,200 a case. You have a choice. You have a choice, right? You can do it at $1,200 or you can walk. Okay. Here's another one. So you're there, you have a contract, and then the hospital says, we were just approached by someone else. You have a contract, it's a 3-year contract. And they, 3-year contract, and you have it, say, $2,200. And they say, you know what, we heard that our friends, I just went to a meeting. I just went to a medical meeting, hospital meeting. And I heard that we're paying $2,200, but I heard there are people getting it for $1,800. Now, we're assuming now that you've done everything, you've decided fair market value is the $2,200. I'm not telling you that $2,200 is a fair market value of anything, I'm just making up a number. So, what do you have to do then? You've got a 2-year, say 3-year contract. At $2,200, everybody agreed it was fair market value when you started, we're now into year 2. Hospital says, you know, I think I should have paid less. What happened? Here's the answer. You actually don't have to renegotiate. Because if it was fair market value when you started, and the term is not too long, 2 or 3 years is a reasonable contract term, you're not required to redo it. You had a fair market value contract. And it was. And so you did it, and there you are. And that's the way it is. Now, if they have the right to, if the contract allows them to terminate it, then they can terminate it. But if you had a contract where they had to keep it for 3 years, or 2 or 3 years, and you had a fair market valuation at the beginning, you don't have to redo it every month or every year. It was that for the term. And then the next term, they can do a new contract, a new negotiation. Even if it, yeah.
What about contracts that we've had in place for, 5, 6, 7 years?
With
that,
the evergreens.
That auto renew.
At some point, the fair market valuation is brought into question.
Right.
But 2 or 3 years is a reasonable amount of time to do a contract and not have to redo it. I don't know at what point it's different, and we'd have to see. Valuation experts can tell us, but I think 2 or 3 years is not a reasonable amount of time to do that before you have to.
What's to prevent them from signing another contract? It's not an exclusive contract with that company that says $1,500 a year.
Nothing. Nothing.
But they're not. But what if they're violating the fair market law? It's not fair market. It's below fair market.
It's okay for them to go below fair market. Here's the thing. I was going to talk about it in the next session. How can you have a problem if you're below and above? It depends on what's going on. So, for example, we'll do it apart from lithotripsy. Let's just take a doctor, 2 doctors. We've got an internist who has a big office, got extra space in the office. Says, you know what, I can rent out a room. And there's a urologist in town who needs an office. He kind of wants to come to here a little bit. So I'll rent that urologist my extra room. But I know that and fair market value, say, is $18 to $20 a square foot in that space. So he says, but I know that this urologist is really going to make out well in my office because I'm going to send that urologist a lot of business. So I'm going to charge that urologist $25 a square foot. All right? That's paying over fair market value. And the reason they're paying over fair market value is because, and the doctor would pay it, the urologist would pay it, because the urologist expects to get business out of it. So he's really paying $5 a square foot more to get the referrals, right? Now let's switch it. The urologist has an office, and he's got extra space. And there's an internist around who wants to rent a room. Still $18 to $20 a square foot. The urologist is hoping that the internist will send the urology business. So it's $18 to $20 a square foot. I'm going to rent it to the urologist at $10 a square foot, because the urologist will send me, because the internist will send me patients. So that's under fair market value, and that's a violation. You see, it depends on the circumstances. You can have a violation over, or you can have a violation under. It depends on the circumstances. So if the hospital pays less than fair market value to a physician-owned company, congratulations to the hospital. But if a non-physician-owned company comes in to do the service and offers it less, that becomes the fair market value, because you have a willing buyer, willing seller, and each one is a disinterested party. So the problem that comes up for physician-owned companies is that the non-physician-owned company sets the fair market value, because that's the best. Because you have all these estimates and valuations, but what actual people do in negotiations is considered the best view. Now the problem you run into, though, is sometimes people undercut. They'll do a loss leader to get the business and then knock everybody out, and that then presents another problem. At some point, it's not worth doing, and why are they getting that? Or we didn't do very well with the OIG on this, but one would think that quality of service would make a difference. I will tell you also that valuation. Now hospitals get valuations, and I will tell you a true experience that I had. I think it was last year or the year before. I went to a conference on fraud. Not how to learn fraud, but about fraud. And they had, one of the companies there was a valuation company. And I was curious because I had seen some things from them. And so I went up to him, I had my name badge on, I had my name, said Winston Strong, I wasn't hiding anything. And I had some questions about literature, said, oh, we got the guy here, and he comes out. And he talks to me, and I said to him, I wanted to ask you about how you figure out. Because what was in my mind was, there are companies that provide great service, and, they have better literature, there's better trained techs, they may provide other things with their service besides, I want to figure it out. So I said, tell me about how you figure this out. And the first question he asked me was, for which side, the hospital or the doctor company? And I was somewhat flabbergasted. So sometimes they cook the valuation depending on who's doing it. And I think that that's an issue that can come up. And then that's something we'll have to face if it comes up. Because sometimes what happens, is, I'm sure you've run into it, is the hospital has a valuation, and you have one, and they compete. And then I know who that company is, and we can talk about it. So, it's not a simple game. And as in anything, valuations vary. Just like, if you were going to rent office space in Chicago, there's not one amount. It's usually a range, right? It's not X per square foot. It's between X and Y. And literature can be that way too. Yeah?
This is the dreaded Sisto issue.
Yeah.
I've heard frequently that when I'm pricing the monthly fee for Sistos, or the use of our table and C-arm, that other vendors are providing that as a cost of doing business. And can that be construed as an inducement for business?
Well, there are two ways to look at it. You could say that, or you could just say it's a package. It's kind of like, we have a client who's told me that I ruined her view of shopping because I told her that when you go to the store and you buy one, get one free, you're not really getting one free, you're buying two, you're paying the price divided by two. And she told me I completely ruined her life on shopping. You know who it is, I'll tell you later. So, is it, so if you come in at X dollars per procedure, and the X dollars includes everything, is it an inducement or is it just what you're providing? Supposing you're providing something else. So that's the question. If it's part of the service, and it's not something that necessarily is billed separately, it could just be that, we provide this is what we provide. We provide the litho service. Now, the problem that comes in on Sistos, though, is because you can't rent per procedure.
Right.
And so maybe that is an issue.
Because then it could be,
right.
If they're doing it as a cost of
Yeah.
business, then I see that as clear inducement.
See, the problem that people have on the Sistos is a couple of things. One is, the government wasn't very happy about lithotripsy. They really hate this case. They wish they could make it go away. So they weren't exactly willing, we've tried, to get them to do anything to help on this issue. And the reality is that Sistos often have to perform, and sometimes you can't predict them, right? They just happen. So the question is what to do about it. We've had various ideas of what to do about it, and one of them is, we tell, some clients just don't charge. They just provide it in, and it's really because no one really knows what to do. And the thought is if you don't pay, if you don't charge, and they get to use it, it's, you're not advertising as one, it's just something you have. And so it's a very, very difficult area.
Savvy attorneys are asking that we at least put some nominal charge in there,
Yeah.
for at least the technical.
Yeah. So then you put a charge in and you're there. Yeah. But it's very difficult, and the government isn't being helpful. And the reality also is that the personnel has changed over time. It just happens, people come and go over time at the OIG, and there were times way back when that you could call the industry guidance branch and they would answer questions for you, and that doesn't happen. And now you have to send in for advisory opinions. The whole, as I told you, my 9-month saga on that case was quick. That was a favor. They pushed me up on the waiting list, and I was put into number 3 behind 2 other free medication cases, and that was 9 months. So it takes years. We did another one for a paying client. It was over 2 years. It just it would take you forever to get the answer, and then it's a whole mess. So that's the problem. More questions? Okay, I think we're here. All right. For those of you who don't have to stay, the people who are unlucky don't get to listen for 2 more hours. The second to last page is a certificate of attendance. So in the first blank, I received 3 hours. Now the problem is we broke it up with lunch, so we'll be a little, we have to be a little careful on this. Training on August 26, 2010. We started at, what, 10 a.m.? 9. No, but that doesn't count. That 9 stuff doesn't count. It only starts when I came. So I think it was 10, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or quarter of 10? 10?
Quarter of
10.
Quarter to.
Was it quarter of 10?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so 9:45 a.m. I think what we'll do is 9:45 a.m. to 1:45 p.m. and then put in parentheses afterwards minus,
30 for lunch.
how much? What?
It was like 30 for lunch or 45?
35 minutes for lunch, so. Does that come out right?
Thereabouts.
Wait,
It's really 45.
what?
It's really 45. 9:45, 10:45, 11:45, 12. We broke until 12:45.
Yeah, it was 45 minutes for lunch. All right, then the training consisted of 2 hours of general training and 1 hour of arrangements training.
Maybe we should go through.
What?
Can we go through who can leave again?
Huh? Hour expanded.
You're on.
Okay? All right, if you go to the OIG website, www.oig.hhs.gov, and you go poking around to look where they have their settlements, every month they put out a link to their settlements they've done. And so they put out the link for July the other day. And this is what they have on the OIG website for United. So I'll give you a couple minutes to read it. Or I can read it to you.
You better because the people in the back will.
Okay, I will read it to you. United Shockwave Services, United Urology Centers, and United Prostate Centers, collectively United, Illinois, agreed to pay $7,359,500 and entered into a 5-year CIA for allegedly violating the civil monetary penalty law provisions. Entered into a 5-year CIA for allegedly violating civil monetary penalty provisions applicable to physician self-referrals and kickbacks. The OIG alleged that United and certain physician investors used their ability to control physician referrals to obtain contract business from various hospitals. Specifically, United threatened hospitals that it would refer patients to competing hospitals if the respective hospitals did not agree to a contract with United, or promised hospitals that did contract with United additional referrals. The relationships between United's physician investors and the hospitals raised stark concerns regarding the financial relationships between United's physician investors and the hospitals to which they made referrals. Also, United sold more shares to physicians who produced more referrals or other business for the company. United had processes for having physicians divest if they did not use United's services sufficiently and offered huge returns on investment with virtually no business risk. Those were the allegations they made, and that's what they wrote in there. And we will talk about them, and what I'm going to do now is go through some of the things that the OIG, among other things, the OIG claimed, and we can look at what the problems were so you can figure out not to do them. Okay, so first of all, what's a kickback? This is what we talked about before. Compensation is less than fair market value. You get fair market value minus the compensation, you get the kickback. Or it can be reversed. Compensation is more than fair market value, compensation minus fair market value is the kickback. As I said before, it depends on what's going on. It's all facts and circumstances driven. It depends on who's paying the money and why. So how can it work both ways? And this is what I gave you an example before. Here's another one. So more than fair market value. There are litho companies that just appoint medical directors. I mean, in this one, I think, was it Drs. Norris and Rubenstein are the medical directors, and they do whatever comes up. And so that's just, that's fine. But there are companies that hire doctors who are big referrers and give them jobs. And so they might hire an extra medical director. Say they give them $2,000 a month and they do 2 hours of work. Now, doctors get paid well, but not $1,000 an hour. And the company wants that physician to invest. Now, why do you think that doctor got that job? My guess is not just on his medical ability. All right, here's the other way. Purchase pays less. Litho company offers units to physicians at $25,000 a unit when the return on investment is $40,000 a year. Physician figures this is a good deal and he buys in and sends his patients. Now, usually, I'm not a fair market valuation expert, but usually when you buy into an investment, if you're going to get more in 1 year back more than you paid, that's usually not a fair market value price. If it's a going concern. If you're a startup and it raises different issues. But if it's a going company,